Perfect. All right. So can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see the screen? Just let me know to make sure I have everything up and running. Perfect. Great. So let us get started. So, all right, before we dive into everything today, can anybody tell me what they remember from last week? What is something interesting, one fact that they found really interesting from last week? Or even one question that you might have had from last week that I couldn't be able to answer? Yes, Camille?
Putin invaded Ukraine, and it's called the Crimea Annex thing.
Perfect. All right. So let's write it. Let me write in the white box. So yeah. So great job. So remember of the annexation of Crimea, where Russia took over a part of Ukraine and kind of claimed it as their own. And of course, that directly ties into a current event, which I'm not sure, does anybody know or understand or know the name of? No, that we talked about last week? Nope. All right, so let me write it out. Okay. Well, that, of course, the annexation of Crimea led to the invasion of Ukraine. I'm sure your parents must know more about this. This is all over the news every day. And yeah, so that is what we learned about last week. What happened after the Soviet Union fell? Putin came into power and was able to reform the country or change the company in a way that grows the economy or makes Russia richer. However, there is some things that came with Putin. There was the bad with the good, and that is the annexation of Crimea. He also censored a lot of media. And of course, this year, he invaded Ukraine. All right. So the title and the focus of this course was Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union. So one of the most important ideas of Soviet Union is something called communism. Well, can anybody give me a definition of communism?
So yes, communism is kind of like where everybody is same except the ruler or like the judges or stuff like important people who have like power, but everybody else is like the same.
Okay. Great explanation. Let me ask a follow-up question for anybody who knows the answer. Can an individual, so a person like me, own a company or own resources? Yes or no? Let's see. Camille, do you remember?
We had like a scale, and it's like once the left side is communist and the right side is fascist.
Yes, that's correct. So what I was asking is kind of, can people in a communist state own material? And the answer is no. So no personal resources. So remember that communism is everybody shares the materials, shares resources, and shares a company. That means that no single person owns anything. All right. So you, me, everybody else can't own anything. Everything belongs to the government. All right. With that established, let's move to the main topic of today, which is the last state of communism, or main state of communism that is still pretty prevalent in today's society. Prevalent just means still in the talks and still pretty powerful. All right, so who or which country do you think is the last state of communism? Anybody have a guess?
China.
That's correct. Blue, may I ask you to change your username so I know who that is talking? Great job. So that's correct. It is China. And well, after the fall of Soviet Union, China became kind of the last state that embraced communism and was the last state to be communist. So let's go through some history between China and Soviet Union. All right, so this is some background, some history. So in May of 1989, we have the Secretary General for Soviet Union called Mikhail Gorbachev. He actually visited Beijing during that time for 3 days, really reestablishing relationships between China and Soviet Union, because China and Soviet Union didn't always have the best relationship, especially with their borders. Borders were very, very important because, well, both countries are very big and they're very picky about what's on the border and where the border is. Therefore, before the talk and the meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev in 1989, there were a lot of tension, so stress between the two countries, not knowing if they're going to war or are they peaceful. So they had a lot of troops and a lot of weapons and a lot of tanks on the boundaries or borders between the two countries. All right, so yeah, this was actually the first visit from a Soviet Union leader since 1969, which was when the border conflicts that I talked about happened. However, after the next 2 to 3 years, really Beijing and Moscow's kind of paths diverged. So China and Soviet Union kind of had different ideas and different plans for their country. And well, why is that case? Of course, we know that Soviet Union fell in 1991. So just 2 years after the visit. So they stopped becoming a global power or a world power. So that was no longer the case. They were no longer a world power. While China, on the other hand, started to have more economic success. They were able to get more power and be a stronger country than Soviet Union, or by the end of Soviet Union, Russia, because Russia was kind of the main state of Soviet Union and one of the strongest remaining of the 15 states. Of course, due to the disbanding of Soviet Union in 1991, they're no longer a world power, and second, there was something called economic stagnation, which just means that the economic growth or the increase in money and the increase in wealth kind of stopped. So people stopped making money, people stopped getting richer. And of course, that is marked by, I'm not sure if you guys remember from last time, we talked about an economic collapse of Soviet Union in 1991. All right, any questions about kind of this background and history? Nope, everybody good? Perfect, great. All right, let's keep going. So yeah, while I was talking, we were talking about China and Russia, where China was growing, but Russia was kind of declining and no longer a very important figure because, of course, well, Soviet Union was no longer a superpower. And thanks to the end of actually Soviet Union, there was less tension between Russia and China. And that made it possible for China to start expanding its resources outside its borders and create this global economy and become this superpower. And you can really see that kind of growth in China on the right graph. You can see that China just explodes in the amount of GDP they have, while Russia kind of just is in a standstill. Yeah, so you can definitely see that the huge difference between Russia and China here, which is kind of crazy. And of course, China, as it started developing and having more money, having more people, and becoming the superpower in Asia, they created this new force and this new idea and this new initiative, which is called the Belt and Road Initiative. What this initiative did was create these roads and these waterways you can see on the map. The blue ones are for water, ocean. The orange / beige one is for roads that they want to build throughout Asia and into Europe to create kind of this global economy where everybody can come together and trade, sell things, buy things, all on this one road. So every country is connected together, or at least all of the very important and large countries. And this really opened the door to China. So it opened China up to a lot of different companies outside and helped companies inside China be able to invest or give their money to outside countries. All right. Great. So that's about economy. But one thing that we really talked about was kind of the other side of the coin of Russia. Does anybody remember who was the other superpower in the world? So we had Soviet Union, Russia on one side. Who was on the other side to kind of balance it out? Would anybody like to take a guess? They're still a really big country now. Does anybody know?
US.
That's correct, yes. So remember, we had Soviet Union versus the United States. But remember, Soviet Union is no longer in the equation, or is no longer here because they broke up and they basically didn't exist anymore. So to replace Soviet Union comes China. So let's talk more about that on the next slide. So actually, China isn't really hostile with the United States. They were actually pretty friendly, especially after the 1980s, after the decline of Soviet Union and the rise of China. These two countries' economic ties grew rapidly. And the meaning of economic ties just means how closely they are in relation to trade. So basically buying things from each other, selling things to each other, and of course, working together to make sure that everybody makes a profit, everybody makes money, and everybody gets wealthier. The person leading the charge of this economic growth and this kind of new tie was President Jimmy Carter on, of course, the United States side. And representing China was Deng Xiaoping. They really tried to make sure that the Chinese and US relationship stayed strong even after Soviet Union. All right. Any question about any of that? Nope. Everybody clear? Perfect. All right. So if that's the case, let's keep going. let's move on. So we talked about the economic power of China, but let's ask, what made China a superpower? Because we have to remember, Russia wasn't just powerful, it was super powerful. So there is one event that really changed China's stance in the world, and that is the 2008 financial crisis. Does anybody know about the 2008 financial crisis? Have you heard of it?
I heard of it. I read it in a money book and I talked about it last time.
Yes, that's correct. Do you remember what caused the financial crisis? Would anybody remember? Anybody can chime in?
Not really. I forgot.
All right. Does anybody understand? Oh, all right. So the 2008 financial crisis was caused by housing.
Is that Donald Trump? He looks like him.
Yes. So this is again a cartoon. It's just a depiction, kind of to be funny. All right. So housing crisis, or sorry, not housing crisis, but the housing market caused the 2008 financial crisis. The reason was a lot of people were betting on the housing market, buying houses, renovating houses, and buying apartments. However, they didn't have the money to actually make those payments. So what happens is that there is these hundreds, even thousands, even 100,000 houses that basically have nobody to live in. They're not completely built, so they couldn't be sold. Nothing can really happen with these houses, while nobody was paying them back because everybody that was buying these houses were broke. So what happened was that the banks were broke. Well, I don't know if you guys know, but banks are very, 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 very important to economy or to any market, because of course they hold all the money and they make sure everybody's money is in a safe place, and also they give you interest, which is a bit money back if you kind of let them keep your money for a while. So the banks were broke. That means nobody can get their hands on any money, and that means we go into a financial crisis because nobody has money. However, there was one special case to that. So the financial crisis was actually global. So everybody was affected by it. However, one country was less affected and actually handled pretty well, and that was China. China handled the economic crisis very, very well because of its growing markets. So, however, there are two problems that came with that. Was overcapacity. I'll explain what that means. And need for new markets. So we talked about how China was handling this very well, so that a lot of people actually wanted to help China and kind of improve China. But that meant that a lot of people were kind of throwing money at China, saying, please take our money so we can make more money. But China didn't have the capacity to take out that money and make sure that that money made more money. So that created this problem of overcapacity. And that means China needed new markets or new places where they can sell and buy stuff. Another part of China was that in 2010, right after the financial crisis, China overtook Japan as the second largest economy in the world. Does anybody have a guess as who's the first one? First largest economy? All right. So it's, of course, the US. US is still the first largest economy because they've always been since World War II, after Europe kind of screwed themselves after World War II and all of the war that decimated their economy and made sure they really couldn't recover completely. So yeah, in 2010, China overtook Japan as the second largest economy, and they were doing really well because everybody else, every other country really suffered from the 2008 financial crisis, except China. What happened then is that a lot of people thought China was this new stability and this new superpower that was going to take over US. So that attracted a lot of investors, and a lot of basically businessmen that wanted to do business with China, which let them have this new access to markets, whether China now has access to North America markets or North America now has access to China. It was kind of a win-win for both sides. China needed more money to come in, and America needed to put their money somewhere else. And thanks to that new money that China took in 2010 through investments. That's a word that you'll learn later on in life, which just means putting your money somewhere or kind of buying something, for example, a company, and having that company make more money for you. What happened was that with this new amount of money that China had, they were able to continue to work on their initiative that we talked about in a few slides ago. Anybody remember the name? Nope. Well, I'll give it a hint. It starts with belt. Belt and
Trail or something?
Close. It's the Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. All right. So the Belt and Road Initiative meant that China had access to a lot of important places like Latin America, Africa, and Eurasia, which means that they could make even more money. And this initiative and this project was worth $100 billion, which is a lot of money, a lot of money. This much money is basically half of Elon Musk's total money that he has. And as you guys know, Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. A crazy amount of money.
All right. He has like trillions or billions of dollars.
So Elon Musk has what we call net worth. So if he sold all his assets, so all of his material, all of his houses, all of his companies, all of his businesses, and everything that he owned, he would have around $250 to $300 billion. Yeah, crazy rich Elon Musk. All right, cool. Any question about this, the financial crisis and what really propelled China into a world superpower? Nope. Everybody good with that? Yes? Perfect. All right, let's keep going. So let's move on to the last slide for today, which is the growing economy. We talked about how China became this superpower, getting all of these new factories that were invested by Americans, as you can see by this cartoon, talking about how they're just very happy for new American jobs. We come back to this page and to talk about the growing economy and what really happened and what China did with all of those money. So unlike Russia or Soviet Union, China wasn't stupid to invest all of their money into the military again. As we learned about last week, one of the major failing points of Soviet Union was that they spent too much money on their military and on their army. So when the Cold War came to a stop and when all the fighting stopped, they had no use for an army, which meant a lot of the factories that help support the armies are also out of business, which meant that most people were out of jobs. If you're out of jobs, you don't make money. If you don't make money, you can't feed your families, and people die of hunger, and a lot of bad things happen. However, the opposite happened with China. Over the past 5 years, China has done a lot using the newfound growth and the newfound money that they have. They lifted 68 million people out of poverty. You guys know what poverty is? Yes? Can anybody give me a definition of poverty?
It's basically when a bunch of people, it's like when you're very poor, basically.
Yes, basically too poor to support your family. And basically, the Chinese government helped 68 million people with all of their expenses to help them make money so that they can support their family. And yeah, so China, while lifting 65 million people out of poverty, also is pledging $17 billion to help poverty alleviation. So to help more people get out of poverty. And of course, well, let's think about what happens to all of the regions that are in the poorer regions of China, the rural regions where people really can't make a lot of money because they're not in big cities. Well, China also is building infrastructure like tourism, unlike Russia. So this is kind of where Russia fails and where China really succeeds, is that China is thinking ahead, thinking about the future and building tourism infrastructures and investing in a lot of these ancient towns to preserve them. You can see here, preserving these very beautiful, very ancient structures of ancient China to make sure that these landmarks and the culture is preserved while making sure that these very rural towns that do not really get a lot of people are able to survive on tourism and having people visit the place. And of course, this is all thanks to, well, money from the US. All right, but there is one downside that I have not talked about from China, and that is this kind of graph that you see here. And this is the unfortunate side of too rapid development, is that there are things that China had to do to catch up as quickly. And unfortunately, in some places, they also couldn't really catch up. And there are some places and some parts of a company that they are still lacking behind. So as I talked about, through the late 1980s all the way to today, China and US had a very good trade relationship. Or that the economy was very interconnected. That's the word. Because they're so interconnected, US relies on China to make a lot of their money. China relies on the US to also make a lot of their money. So it's some kind of this symbiotic relationship. So basically, one relies on the other to work. If one of them fails and one of them disappears, both of them collapse. So it's very important to know this connection. So what happens was that, well, the US in the 1980s really wanted access to China because they understand that China is this new superpower that's going to allow them to be able to reach a lot of these different markets. And so to access the Chinese market, which has over 1 billion people, which is crazy to think about, because if every single person spent $1, they could have made $1 billion. And if everybody spent $100, they could have made $100 billion, which is, well, again, a lot of money. So US wanted to sell things to that 1 billion people. So to have China agree to allow US to invest and dump money into China, US had to share intellectual properties with China. So what intellectual property means is anything that has kind of a copyright, anything that is owned by the US that they kind of developed by themselves. For example, the iPhone. The iPhone has something called intellectual property because, well, the phone and the copyright and the blueprints are owned by Apple, or the company Apple. So what happens is that to be able to work these phones and be able to create these phones cheaper and to make more profit in China, they had to share all of their ideas, all of their technological innovations with companies and, of course, the government in China. And this was kind of a two-edged sword. So it kind of helped both sides, but also kind of stabbed both sides in the back. Let's talk about that. So, of course, the topic is US shares intellectual property. Let's talk about what happens. All right, let's draw kind of a chart to see what happened. Let's do China, pros. We have China, US. We have pros. We have cons. All right, let's go through some of them by listing this chart. Kind of fun. All right. So the pro for China was they were able to make a lot of money. And they were able to develop. Because with these blueprints that US shared with China, they were able to develop faster than usual, and they didn't have to start everything from scratch. It's the same thing as baking. If you bake from scratch without a recipe, it's much harder. But if you use a recipe while you bake, it's much easier to develop a good tasting dish. That's the same that happened with China. They were able to get the recipes for these technology and to be able to create these designs faster. And the pro for the US was, again, money. Both sides made money. And a new market, of course, for the new US. They were able to access a lot of the people in China. They were able to sell into China. And that's kind of what happened was US traded their blueprints, traded their recipe for this big open market. Okay, so let's move on to some cons because nothing is always good, right? There's always kind of this downside. The downside for China is kind of from the development of technology really fast, even with this extra money, is that all of their tech was developed with no foundation. So they have no tech foundation / support. A lot of their technology ideas are reliant on US. So if US stops giving them new updates on technology, China will start falling behind because they never developed the engineers, they don't have the scientists, and they didn't really prepare to be on their own so fast and also to develop without US. So if US pulled out of China and don't let China use any of the US designs, as we see what Trump did to China, kind of banning China from using any of US techs, China kind of crumbles a bit because they no longer have the glue, which was US and US technology that held them together. And of course, the cons of US is sharing the intellectual property. Because of course, US poured billions of dollars into creating these recipes, these blueprints for phones, for computers, and for all of this. And to be able to get extra money and to sell them in China, they had to share them with China, which meant that they lose their edge to become like this very technically advanced country in the world, or the most technologically advanced country in the world. And that helps China catch up. And of course, that's a con for the US. So you can kind of see both sides kind of benefit from them, but both sides kind of also kind of detract from it or subtract from it. So kind of that double-edged sword. You're making money, but you're also losing something during the time. And what this graph is it probably doesn't mean a lot to anybody, but let me just focus your attention to this row. So basically these numbers, the smaller these numbers are, means the more advanced the technology is. And this is to create what is called semiconductors. Semiconductors are basically the core of and the heart of every electronic device. Any device that you see, from your oven, from your smart oven that you can program, to your alarms, to your microwave, to your phones, to your desktops, to any microphones, to even your refrigerator, has a semiconductor in it. And this semiconductor basically is the brains of the operation. They make sure that all of the technology, every piece of the technology works together and works well together. And this piece of technology, the smaller it gets, if you see here, the smaller it gets, the better it is, the faster it is. And well, we can, if we see on the chart of how much money they can make from this newest advanced technology, TSMC basically operates in the US. This is, of course, SMIC is purely China. And Taiwan is, again, a local Chinese/Taiwanese business. And the only company that has ties to still has ties to the US is the only company that is making money in the most advanced sector and is making the most money out of that advanced sector. So you can see kind of that double-edged sword. US loses a lot of money from China and Taiwan because they don't want to share the intellectual property. And China, because they rely so much on the US technology, they're not able to catch up and they're not able to produce the newest edge, the bleeding edge technology. All right. Okay, I know that was a lot. So any questions on that? Or is everything very clear? Anything about the semiconductors that you don't understand, or even about the economy? Nope. Everybody good? No questions? All right. So if there's no questions, that is the end of today's class. And yeah, that's the end here. And let's move on to the game that I promised you guys, because of course it's the last class, and let's move on to the game. All right. So let me stop this recording. Let's move on to the other one. Victor, I do not know why you can't speak. Maybe your microphone is not connected. So if you can fix that, we can get you speaking again. And of course, we're moving to this game, and this game requires everybody's webcam to be on. So if you guys do have a webcam, I hope you guys can turn this on. And of course, not only turn on a webcam, but also change your name to your actual name, because this game will take a lot of coordination. Basically, it's everybody to themselves. All right. Okay.
Now what?
Let's play the game. Give me a second. Let me share this.
You go to a website or something?
You said the order was the like people who won Kahoot, but like the Ethan who got like first place isn't here.
Okay, so if Ethan's here, second place I believe was Lyndon.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So Lyndon gets to pick first the country that they want. All right. Okay. Do you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So all right. At this time, I am allowing everybody to unmute if they want to join in and hop into the game. And Lyndon can start by picking up here. If you see the different countries, we have France, Turkey, Russia, England, Italy, Germany, and Austria. You get to pick your first country. Let's get Camille. I believe you can pick the next one because I believe you got fourth place, third place, sorry?
Third place.
Yeah. All right, Lyndon, it's up to you.
England.
All right, so you want England. So write that down and remember you got England. Camille?
Okay.
Do you have a preference? Of course, I'll explain this game after everybody picks kind of their spot.
France.
France. Okay, great. Let's write that down. Camille has France. We have Lyndon on England. All right. Do we have Charlie? Would you like to participate?
I'm not gonna.
Sorry? I couldn't hear you. There was a lot of background noise. Okay, sure. If there's only 2 people, this might, let me change up this a bit then.
If there's 2 people, it's bad because, you know, there's only
It's one versus the other.
Yes, that's correct. Give me a second.
And this.